Okay, welcome to another episode of Farm Like a Hero, folks, with me, Richard Perkins. Today's a little different episode. I'm with Florian Bonenfant, who's from Terrateck, which is Europe's largest small-scale vegetable tool and supplies company. He's trained as an engineer and as an organic farmer, but he's acting as the sales and market development manager for most of the worldwide development, except for the United States, Canada, and Australia. So I'm really interested to hear about current trends, how Terrateck got started, and what their future vision is. So, Florian, thanks so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us today.
Thank you for the interview. I got my master thesis was about wireworm regulation in organic farming. And it worked. Basically, now I will reveal something which I shouldn't. I financed my thesis by selling wireworms to Bayer. They were paying €3 for each wireworm alive.
Wow. That sounds highly lucrative.
it was very lucrative because my work was just to be under the potato cleaner with a thinner, get the wireworms out and the dust, counting, and bring them to Bayer. It was 2 hours work for, I think it was nearly €30,000.
Oh my gosh. Well, there you go. That's going to open up avenues for someone.
Exactly. But it was very funny, and it wasn't a mistake from my side. When I delivered the wireworms, they asked me to put them in potting soil. And me as an organic farmer, I put it into organic potting soil with high biological activity.
Mm-hmm.
They've been killed by all the nematodes which were in the potting soil.
Mm.
So 2 weeks later, I got a call from Bayer. Lucky I am, they paid me before. All the wireworms were dead. And I said, oh, I can't deliver more. It's not possible, because I think they would have found out that was the reason. And basically, this is where I started to understand that microbiology and looking very carefully into soil is a solution for the new type of farming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said, so your interactions with the large sort of agribusinesses like Syngenta, Monsanto, those things, you were pretty disillusioned by finding out they didn't have solutions to the things that they're trying to address.
That I knew from the beginning, that it was not my type of farming. Mm-hmm. My mother raised me with organic products and always a lot of self-cooking. So get always fresh food from the markets twice a week or 3 times a week, mm-hmm. Which is in Germany then not possible anymore because it doesn't exist. So the gap, because I grew up in France and went back to Germany after the divorce of my parents, was a big issue and a big change in my life.
And maybe we can segue back into, so the company really started with humble beginnings, and it's grown massively, right, over those 7 years. Yeah. So maybe you could describe a bit like where you're at now as a company.
So now at the moment, I would say, so we are growing about, and we try to keep it that way, not more than 20% a year, which is gigantic, and it is difficult to manage.
Yeah. What do you think's been major influences in the rise of, because from my own perspective as an educator in this field, I think it's market gardening, small-scale intensive market gardening has grown in popularity more than any other arms of regenerative agriculture. And is that, like, how have you sort of, what's your understanding on how that's been coming around?
I think there are 3 ways, if I'm not wrong. So once it's the highly educated people who are leaving town and installing themselves into the countryside or close to a city on a plot of land and start farming because of they have their vision. Of course, the new media with YouTube, Facebook, Instagram had a big role to it. The influencer like you, like Jean-Martin Fortier, Curtis Stone, it's a big movement due to that. Then money is a big issue. You can't start a farm on 5, 10, 15, 100 hectares just from scratch. This was the second one. And the third one is just that even in universities, they are now talking about the cash flow and the money return on short term, and that market gardening is the best way to do that.
Yeah, certainly it's those points of like access to land, particularly here in Europe, and often young people wanting to come into farming without that farming background, who it's a low barrier to entry and you don't need to invest a lot. And so that's been a big rise. And it's interesting, you were telling me just before we got on the call about the, like something that I really try and impress on people in our educational work is like to buy the right tools at the right scale for what you're doing to optimize your work. And they're really not big costs. Things like a greens harvester, 600 euros. It seems a lot to someone who's trying to pinch pennies and put too much of their capital into actually buying a plot rather than leaving adequate funds to actually start up successfully. And so I always really try and impress those points to make sure people don't get disillusioned by setting up in a bad way and then overworking themselves as a consequence. But you had an experience like that yourself. Maybe you could share that with us.